cat is in child form today.
I'm waiting for them to both appear on the same screen so we can disprove that theory.
It's always possible you just went and got a cat that looked like her when she's in her cat form.
Remember, Thora, in this game, you only need to remember three keys: Control, Alt, Delete.
You're pressing the Windows key. All of a sudden, root menus start popping up.
I have a fancy keyboard that lets me disable the Windows key because I used to hit it all the time by accident when I was trying to hit Control and WASD.
So let's see here. It's been a while since we did this. So does everybody remember where we parked? No doubt. Radically even. Rex is dead and has created a small lake. He died in the middle of the river. Okay, so I guess I'll provide a summary. So the events, and this is, by the way, the beginning of Act 2. You finished Act 1 in the last game. We're with the culmination of the attack on Rithipol Landing and the shipwrecking yard, which failed. So have you folks had an opportunity to read what I posted in the Discord concerning your roles? I'm seeing nods and.
I did.
Okay, so all right. If you didn't read it, then be confused. That's fine. Several weeks have passed since the end of the battle, and a lot's happened. In that time, the many ships have arrived. There are several hundred ships that Rithipol Landing operates throughout the system, because there's more than just the ring world. There's all these other ruins on these other planets that are being studied and resources extracted, et cetera, et cetera. A large number of them came in response to the attack. And that fleet has assembled protectively above Rithipol Landing. The Rithipol herself has settled back down into her parking position in the lake. It was fortunate how things turned out with her, because it could have gone much worse. So we got here. I see. So too the Eliethia and the Bare Necessity, which had to land outside of town because the starport was significantly damaged in the attack with the destruction of the Loalar. So the starport is being repaired, and the damage to the city, picking up the pieces. I think I want to start with at the end of that, a couple of weeks after the end of the battle, big meeting of the council in the mood, where they reauthorize, or rather, not reauthorize for the first time, Emmerich's expedition. You may remember at the beginning of this whole thing, at the beginning of the game, the very first thing that happened was Emmerich Torino proposed an exploratory expedition to go find out what happened to the rest of civilized space, because 70 odd years ago, we just lost contact with everybody. And at that time, the decision was made by the leaders of the council, which were still essentially the players from the old Rithipol, to cut off contact with everybody out there. We took in some refugees, people that were fleeing whatever was going on. They didn't know what was going on. But at some point, we just cut it off. We said, no, we can't risk whatever's going on out there to come in here. So that's where we left it for 70 years. Now we have the situation where someone not a part of Rithipol Landing, but still a part of this system, another colony on the ring world, made that step for us. That was Relemica and his folks have gone. They went out to, if the prisoners are accurate, they went to Way Station 1. Now, I got to pull something up for you folks that you haven't seen in a while, but I think you'll be happy to see again. Let me find it real quick. All right. Actually, yeah, let's start there. I'm going to take over presenting for a moment, if I may. I need to show this map. There's a button for this in there. Here, a tab. And what's the name of the tab? It is hopefully named. Yeah, you guys remember this. Base is big. Actually, yes. We'll zoom way out. Space is big. And this is only, the small little section of civilized space. You guys, in your last campaign, were up here, hereabouts. Let's see if I can find it right.
Search for Kogri, Cogri.
Yeah. I see the sword rules. I'm generally getting my bearings because here it is. I haven't seen it myself in a while. So here you are. Lanth, Deganzi, here's Kogri over here. Yeah. So this is where the Bare Necessity had its journeys and the beginning of the Rithipol's journey in Sonthert. Where you ended up, we'll zoom out. Way down here. Right here. What's called the Analyte Cloud. It's a nebula. It's in this huge rift between spiral arms. The closest outpost, and this is back in the golden days when there was such a thing, is this little thing over here. Yokawar, that is an Aslan mining colony. There were only a few hundred people there. But as you see, it's out in the middle of nowhere. And it took quite a bit to get there, either from the Ring World, which was over here, Analyte Cloud again, or from there back to civilized space. Because from there, your closest is this guy up here, which is not a developed area, but still it has a place you can refuel. And all of these are several parsecs away. This is 8 parsecs, Yokawar here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rather, I should say. And then this guy, if you wanted to get up there, I can't tell you because the cat is in the way of the navigation screen. Excuse me. There you go, buddy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then from there, it's sane. It's like a jump 3. But you get these huge leaps. And with the tech of the day, typically warships were the only ones that did anything better than jump 2. And even warships tended to max out at jump 4. The Eliethia, close escort, the 400-ton close escort that you found, is one of those ships capable of jump 4. But as I point out, jump 4 doesn't get you all the way. Cat. Yeah. Okay. Okay, bud. He saw the light on the webcam and was suddenly very fascinated. Jump 4, only get you to here, which is still another jump 2 away from the Okalar War. So what folks did in the olden days is the Ring World established 2 way stations, 2 jump 2 away. So you had, and I'm not sure if you can see the mouse cursor. So I'll just center it. There we go. So that, you might be able to see the dot. Where the little tiny dot is where they established way station 1. And the way that this was done was by the time you were ready to reach out 80, 90 years ago, had established Rithipol Landing and were wanting to get back in touch with the rest of civilized space. And you realized, you knew where you were at that point, but you realized that this was what you had to do to get to that closest colony, and you didn't have a ship capable of doing it. So you needed to build gas stations, essentially. You needed to have a place where ships with jump 2 or jump 4 could refuel to make the rest of the journey. And then you had to have a way for them to have enough fuel to get back. So you built these way stations out of freighters, similar to the Trinity Holcomb that of recent vintage that was destroyed last game. These freighters were built upon, fuel storage tanks added, many jumps made by small tankers to fill those fuel storage tanks. And we're talking about tanks, space station size tanks with hundreds of thousands of tons of fuel storage. That took a long time to fill, with the little jumps. You didn't have the Yortheim 9,000-ton tanker to make these trips at the time. But over time, it got done. And you had for several years thriving way stations. You could make jump 2 jumps all the way to that outpost. That outpost had its own means of finding its way back. They had ships, jump 3 or 4 ships that would make the trip out there regularly on their own. So once you establish contact with that asteroid outpost, it was within a year that you were able to establish contact and send word back that, hey, we're alive here. That was the golden age. That was probably 85 to 75 years ago. A good 10 years of pretty fair traffic. A lot of the traffic, the nature of it was scientific. People came out to look at the ancient marvel of the ring world and the ruins that were here, because the ruins here are probably the richest collection of ancient ruins ever found. You found ancient ruins everywhere. They're scattered all over civilized space, but never so concentrated, so much in one place, and such a variety, because there was clearly a huge battle, many different sides that took place here, and many of those sides are still represented in one way or the other. 70 years ago, all that changed. That's when whatever happened to civilized space began to happen. And when I say whatever happened, I mean that from the perspective of folks here in this yellow area, which is the Aslan hierarchy, that's Aslan home space, they started losing communications with this area over here, which was the Imperium. Again, nobody really knew what was going on, but word started filtering in that whole areas of the core worlds of the Imperium were losing contact with them. Now, contact in Traveler is established by ships traveling. There is no faster than light communications. Faster than light travel in the form of jump drives, but not faster than light communications. So the only way that material communications happened between these vast stretches of space is by a ship going there, a ship going from system to system, delivering messages, what have you. Now, most of the larger empires, the Imperium, the Aslan, all those good guys, had routes, essentially mail carriers. It was called the X-boat service in the Imperium. Jump 4 ships whose job was to simply, for purposes of carrying messages, electronic data, they built a series of ships that all they had was jump 4 jump drives and fuel, and then they would jump to a point, and then a tender would come up, relay the messages to another X-boat, refuel, and then they would go on its way. And this route, just multiple routes, just branched throughout the Imperium and into neighboring space. It was those that started dropping off. They started noticing X-boats weren't making their assigned times. And then the fact that X-boats were missing spread first. And then ships came up missing, ships that were expected to make regular routes, freighters that had this trade routes that they regularly applied over months. They started not making their assigned routes. And that information started spreading. And that was the sort of thing that you were getting. You were just getting word that from the core worlds, there was this unusual thing going on, but nobody really had an explanation for it. And it started off innocent enough, because that happens sometimes. Ships get lost. Space is hazardous. But when it started happening to one system is one thing, then a dozen, then 100, then people started really getting worried. Then there were sort of stories of battles going on. Maybe there was some sort of civil war going on in the Imperium that was spreading, slowly like a wave as ships spread. So by the time it got to, this is a great natural barrier, the rift, because as we pointed out, jump 6 is it. There is no ship faster than jump 6, and even military ships typically only did jump 4. Jump 4 is a tiny fraction of what's necessary to cross the rift at any of its places. There were some routes like you see here that were established trade routes with pre-built way stations similar to what Rithipol built. But those, as whatever was happening spread from the Imperium into Aslan space, those were intentionally cut off. But even then, over time, it seemed to spread into Aslan space proper on this side of the rift. And at that point, the folks up here, you folks, here you go, right here, realized that it was just a matter of time before your neighbors were going to succumb to whatever this was, because it was still unknown. No explanation for what was happening ever reached you. What did reach you were refugees. You started seeing them come in by the dozens, then the thousands, and the tens of thousands. There was a space of about a year where a large number of refugees came in through the way stations. And it was clear that these were folks in these subsectors that you see that knew about the ring world, that you'd had years of commerce with, and thought it might be a safe bet because of its distance over the rift. These were the folks that came in, almost all of them Aslan, and most of them went off on their own. And one of the groups that came in was the group that had Rithipol himself. But I wanted to point out that a large population of Rithipol Landing is refugee. The refugee Aslans that came from the subsectors to your left, shall we say. But a larger number of those Aslan just went elsewhere in the ring world. It's a freaking huge ring world. Why all crowd together? And the Aslan are very territorial. So when they had all this territory to spread out into, they did. Most of them are peaceful. That you lost track of a lot of them because, again, it's large. The ring world is thousands and thousands of Earth surface area. It's hard to keep track of that with the few people that you have. A few of them you keep track of. A few of them you actually have regular trade with, but the vast majority of them just went their own way. Until you came across the Relemicans decades later that decided they wanted you. Because in all of that development, Rithipol Landing was really the only place that maintained a tech level equivalent to the Imperium. You had the resources of the labs, the computers, the databases, the knowledge, because the survivors of the Rithipol were scientists and engineers, and they built Rithipol Landing, and their descendants learned from them. These other folks, the refugees, they were just from wherever, common folks, they were from all walks of life, and they didn't have the same resources. Rithipol Landing helped them, helped support them, get them set up, but the only starport really in the whole ring world is the starport at Rithipol Landing. The only place that's capable of refurbishing or even building ships is Rithipol Landing. At least we thought that was the case until the Loalark came along. So at some point, the leaders of Rithipol Landing say, okay, enough's enough. Whatever's happening is reached this subsector over here, the Fisher Trench and all these guys, and it's headed our way. We need to cut it off. So you cut it off. The act of cutting off was as follows. You had the two way stations, way station 1, and you may see the little dot in way station 2. And they were along the path between you and that asteroid field. So the idea was at the time you didn't want to just up and blow them up because you might need them again sometime, and it took an enormous engineering project to build them in the first place. Because we're talking at the end, they were full-fledged space stations, high ports. You drained the fuel. That was the most important thing. The whole point of the way stations was to provide a refueling spot for ships that couldn't make the jump on their own. So by draining the fuel, you effectively remove them as useful way stations. That if you don't have the fuel to get to the ring world, you don't get to the ring world. Simple as that. That was one. Two, you relocated them. No, they were well known. They were positioned in well-known places, at least well-known to the ships that would be transiting back and forth to the ring world from Aslan space. So a way to make them, preserve them, yet make them less useful to anybody that might go there is to move them. And by moving, I mean as part of draining the fuel, they attached engines, they fired up the engines rather, on the ship that was the core still of each of the way stations. and just accelerated it for about a month and kept it going on that vector. That way, where it will be, because you're the ones that did the acceleration and you can do math, but other people don't know which direction you accelerated it or for how long and how much. So they're going to jump into the old location of the way station. And meanwhile, the station itself is like 400 million kilometers that way in deep space. Typically, ships, after they make a jump, they have a couple of weeks of fuel left for sublight routine operations, and 40 million kilometers. No, they may not even be able to make that trip. So those were the two main ways that you neutralized the usefulness of the way stations. You moved them, and they are on a vector that you drain the fuel from them simply by opening the tanks and letting them vent, forcing the fuel out into space. It's not easy to recover that. And then removing any sort of useful supplies like food or such like that. The idea was if you needed the way stations again, you bring your own. So that's how that turned out. Apparently, though, our boy Relemica has decided to make use of Emmerich's work to try to fire up these way stations again to get back to civilized space for his own purposes. The prisoners that you've interrogated said that the first goal was to reactivate way station 1 and get fuel out there. And to really do that efficiently, they needed the geotime. They captured the geotime, and they were going to go out there, and they captured the Trinity Holcomb. They basically had everything they needed. They were just going to fire those guys out there and do their thing, except you saw what happened. You took the Yortheim back, and the Trinity Holcomb, when she came back, was not all that friendly, either to Relemica or to you. So that's where you stand. The High Council has decided, okay, we can no longer ignore what's going on out beyond us. We don't know that what happened today or recently has anything to do with what happened 70 years ago. It probably does not. But still, there's a mystery associated with why the Relemicans' plan failed. So we need to go find out what that is. All right, let me share this with you. Share a link. Get link. Give me a link. It's a link. Okay. I direct you to the Saturday Night Gaming Hangout where I'm putting a link to a document. And if you will look at the second tab of that document, I guess I'll present that as here, just for our studio audience. A tab called Eliethia. Yes, please. Yeah, that second tab. The first tab is the skill matrix, basically all the characters and their skills. It may not be accurate for what you guys have, but it's useful to me. Can I zoom in any? Zoom, make it bigger. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what you see before you is a list of jump-capable ships in the Rithipol Navy fleet with a capacity greater than Jump 2. Jump 2 or greater. They can actually reach the waypoint. You have lots of Jump 1 ships, free traders and such, but they can't make the trip. So Jump 2 capable ships are better, that are active and manned and ready to go, that you can make ready within a reasonable time frame. There is one Jump 2 capable ship not on the list, and that's the Rithipol herself, which is not leaving. Perhaps for obvious reasons. The High Council wants her here to defend Rithipol Landing. The big guns matter. But everything else is free game. One of those ships, the Eliethia, is the one you're sitting in. But you may see a couple of other familiar names. You have the Munin, which was that probe formerly from that Felix got lost in and has recently been recovered. The Bare Necessity herself, one of 3 far traders that you have available to you. And I want to point out, and the Yordhall. and an honorable mention is the Anne Catherine Blackridge. It's the biggest warship in the Rithipol Navy. What they used to call a colonial cruiser, but is really a corvette class, 1,200 tons, lots of guns, well armored, but capable of jump 4. In fact, there are only 3 ships that are in this group. That's the Rithipol, the Eliethia, and the Anne Catherine. So here's the deal. The council approaches you folks, and the collective you that led the efforts to quell the attack and recovered the Eliethia, all that good stuff. Along with along with Emmerich, because Emmerich is the one that's the leader of the expedition, but Emmerich I don't know the first thing about combat, anything like that, so I need help. So I guess it would be Emmerich that approaches you folks and says, look, we need to plan out how we're going to approach this task. The goal is go to way station 1 and find out what's going on there. See if there's some threat, and if not, ultimately we need to reactivate the way station so that we can make the next step to way station 2, where we do the same thing. See if there's some threat, and then reactivate the way station. Then we can maybe make our way to the first outpost, to the abandoned asteroid mine, or at least we think it's abandoned. So how would you folks go about it, given these resources? You have these ships at your disposal, where the way station should be. You just don't know what's there. So what is your thought? How would you do this? Important point. The Yortai does need to go, because what I wanted to point out there is you'll see over here is the column fuel CJ2.
Yeah.
That's how much it take for, if all of these ships went, that's how much fuel it would take for that one jump 2. And that, as you can see, the total fuel in the fleet, 9,000 tons, most of it's on the Yortai. So the Yortai gives you the ability to get there and get back. If you don't take the Yortai, you won't be able to get back.
Warships would be able to get there and get back, but just barely.
That's true. That's true, because that's half of their jump range. So that's the Eliethia and Anne Catherine Yortai. Turn off the bold here. I'm going to bold whoever you decide to take with you. So yeah, Yortai really needs to go if you have any large contingent.
I'd recommend some scout ships come with each step of the way, and at each step return. That way they can let people know what's going on if we run into trouble right away or get further out.
At least map the route, breadcrumbs.
The deal with the scouts is, with the exception of the Munin, the scouts only have enough for a single fuel for a single jump 2 jump. After that, they can refuel off of other ships, but it takes hours for these refueling operations, as you would expect. So if you get there and you find something, they may not have enough time to refuel to get back. So if you're doing the go there, find out what's there, and come back, you need something that can come back quickly. And there's only 4 ships that can do that, actually. Munin, Yortai herself, the Anne Catherine, and the Eliethia.
Do we have the hardware laying around to install collapsible tanks in the cargo holds of the Type S?
Not quickly. It's something that certainly can be done, but it would take, call it, several months for the engineers to be able to get it up again. It's not, jumping out to the waypoints was not something we were really thinking about, except in the concept of Emmerich's theoretical expedition, which was not approved. So they never actually went through the motions of doing it. You can wait and get that done, but waiting might not be the best thing given what happened. So
I think the Eliethia ought to go. It's got the fuel to make it out there and make it back.
all righty. So let me find something appropriate here. Okay, so Eliethia.
Could you jump out there far enough away from the target that you'd have time to refuel and let something run away?
Actually, yes. Now, this whole thing is in deep space. There's no system, star, planet, and it's been there for decades. So any trace of what's going on there, if you were to jump in, say, a light day away from, 24 light hours away from it, you'd be able to see what was going on 24 hours ago, and they wouldn't be able to see you for another 24 hours. Absolutely, yes. For terms of scouting, jumping out there a very far distance away from what you expect it to be there and just take a picture essentially and then jump back is entirely plausible. Now, if you were to do that, there are two ships that are ideal for that role. Let's see. The Munin that's its intended purpose. It was intended to be actually an unmanned jump to probe. It would go out there, take a scan of the system, and then come back autonomously. The other ship that has superior sensory capability that would be ideal for this role, but would need to be refueled, is the Gretchen Royal, the lab ship, because it's specifically tooled to go out there and take detailed scans and analytics of anything that it sees. All the other ships have varying degree of sensor capability. The Eliethia, the Bare Necessity, has mil-spec sensors, and Catherine, Yordhall. But those mil-spec sensors are good, but they're not as detailed as what's on the lab ship is the best.
I'd vote that we take the Gretchen Royal to observe waypoint 1, refuel, and it will go back as we go on toward waypoint 2. The waypoint 2, the Anne Catherine refueled there, could get all the way back as we go on to asteroid, right? That would give us 2 levels of scouts that we could drop off and get back to Rithipol while we're going on to the 3rd target if we need to.
Another thing too is that we need to bring at least one ship that can carry a skeleton crew to leave behind at waypoint 1 to keep it operational as a fallback.
To that point, you have a couple of options there. All the far traders were intended for carrying passengers. They have low berths, they have extra staterooms. You also have some of the military ships, the Type T patrols, and the Type T patrols have specific barracks spaces for troops, but that can also be used for prize crews. And if all else fails, the Yordhall has a large number of low berths. So Emmerich asks, what I think it would be most important to the High Council that we reconnoiter waypoint 1 first and then immediately report back without proceeding further, because they're going to want to approve any further egress from the ring world. And I think I understand that. I actually agree with it at this point, given that we've had what's happened. So our goal should be simply to reconnoiter waypoint 1 and then report back what we find. Not worry about moving further until we're cleared to do.
If that's the case, then the only ships we can really send would be the Munin, which would go on autopilot, of course, the Eliethia, and the Catherine. We wouldn't want to risk the Yordle, and none of the other ships could make 2 jumps.
So as you pointed out, yeah, that's true. You can. The only ones that you'd be able to make this under that are the ones capable of jump 4 or 2 jump 1s with fuel capacity. And that's that list. It's Munin, Eliethia, and Catherine. And if you don't want to risk the Yordle herself, then that's your list. Yeah. And I want to also point out that there's going to be some pushback from the gunners about taking the Anne Catherine, because they want her to stay for the same reason they want the Rithipol to stay. Defense of the homeland. Because she's your biggest warship. If you would be able to convince the council, I think, if you deem it necessary, but that, just throwing that out there.
They can keep that. We'll just take the Gretchen Royal.
Yeah, have to have a way to refuel her.
For the main trip, not for scouting.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. It sounds like you're carving this up into a scout mission first, and then, based on the results, the expedition to move on to waypoint 2. Is that a fair summary of your thinking?
Seems reasonable to me.
Okay, so let's talk about the scout mission. The first thing you're going to do. So how are you going to do that?
As nice as the automated probe is, I think we want somebody there to be able to see and react to what's going on for this initial.
Do the choose 2 of the Type S scouts.
They can't double jump.
Yeah, the only one that can is Munin. You can put people on the Munin. She's got 1 stateroom. But
Yeah,
the
because that's
only,
that's how we had those 2 people at the
that's right.
shipwrecking yard.
So the question is, do we want to send the Munin with just 2 people aboard, or do we send the Eliethia?
Or both.
If it's purely scouting, the fewer ships, the better. So I'd say send them in with 2 volunteers that know what they're doing.
Well, what's the absolute bare minimum to keep Way Station 1 alive if we find it cleared?
Remember our lesson on receiving computer transmissions too.
Okay, there were 2 points made there. To C's point, it's a space station. If you're actually going to fire it up, you're probably going to need a couple of 100 people, engineers and techs,
Right.
to retool it, get the systems back online. It's a big undertaking. To what Nev just said, I think, Nev, you were talking about limiting comms. You might want to explain that.
The automated processing of received messages that caused one of our ships to blow up.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I'm super glad you brought that up. So that's a cautionary tale. How do you want to handle that for ships that are going in? What are the SOPs you want to put in place in order to handle the danger that you've seen so far?
Probably a divide and conquer situation of separating automated systems from comm systems so they can't automatically engage things. That would require more manual effort on people's behalves on different stations, but
And here brings a reason not to use the Munin. The Munin, as a wholly integrated, autonomous, semi-intelligent system, probably couldn't operate that way. You couldn't separate, for example, it's smart enough to be able to see flashing lights as Morse code as communications, just by visual sensors. If somebody were to interact with it, send a message that way that is deleterious, how do you reprogram it quickly to ignore that sort of thing? And that would be a task far too difficult to do. So this reinforces the necessity to have actual people manning the systems, and the autonomous Munin might be in danger if you send it by itself. The Eliethia, as an older ship, it would probably be much easier to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it still needs some repair work anyway for the battle damage, and we hadn't gotten her fully put back together yet. So
That's right.
it would be easier to make sure we separate out the comm systems completely.
rip out that automatic transmission, put in a stick shift.
That's right.
On tonight's episode of Battlestar Galactica.
It does. It does sound very much like what the modern Galactica was having to do with their ships. So that's what you're coming up with. Okay, folks with engineering and mechanics, make some rolls. Let's see how well you do. And I'm gonna switch back over to our Eliethia stream, and we'll see how this goes. Turret Maestro. Okay, let's see what we got here. And a computer roll for anybody with computer. That's a good one. Okay.
And you said mechanics.
All right. I think between all of you, you'll manage to pull this off. What you'll end up with is comms, automated transponders, all that good stuff, which were standard on ships of this class. They have been isolated to their own system, only accessible from the bridge. That also means that things like your comm dots can't access ship comms. You can talk to each other, but you can't access the ship. So that's going to put a little bit of a hamper on how you're used to operating things remotely or you're having data points throughout the ship. All of that has to be hardline now. That said, we'll give you a benefit for time served as it was, because it took a couple of weeks for the council to get to the point it was ready to meet on all this. You were probably thinking about the necessity of working on the Eliethia to make this way from the beginning. So when the mission opportunity comes up, we'll say that the Eliethia is most of the way there. The repairs have been made, hull repaired and patched. That one plasma fusion gun now operational. You recall you only had 3 turrets working out of 4. And your comms isolated and the computer's all up to snuff. So my next question is, who goes? Who do you want on the Eliethia for the scouting mission? Emmerich wants to go. So that's a slot. He realizes he's not a military commander or anything like that, but it's his mission, he feels, and his responsibility. He wants to be there, if nothing else, to support what happens. So that's Emmerich. Who else? And you select between your PCs. There are limited seats, unless you want to double up. There are only 8 staterooms.
Well, my 2 can double up.
Okay, so that's your 2. And you need a medic, so it's fortunate. And an engineer, so. Who else coming? Well, Virgil's coming, because, I don't want Virgil to be lonely.
Samuel would probably volunteer to go.
Okay. You're still hurting, but now that you've had access to a couple of weeks in modern medical care, you're a lot better. Janice would prefer to stay behind.
She doesn't have a lot of.
Right. So let me get a list fired up here.
Loki would go if I.
Okay. Loki, Virgil. Let's see. Emmerich. Ultimately, you choose Neff, but he would ask Bitterman to come along. He doesn't know Ron. He doesn't know Ron, not Isaac, but he knows Bitterman. And Bitterman had good insight, good instincts. And yes, Bitterman might say, I don't know anything about space. Emmerich would say, I don't know anything about space either, and I'm going.
Well, is there room for Pris or not?
There is. If you want to, have the Pris in your stateroom. No one's going to object, I think. Pris has been damn helpful.
I'm wondering if she'd be happy there.
She'd be a little freaked out, but she goes where you go.
Why not? Did we have a chance to put the skull of Rex as a figurehead on the Eliethia?
Give it some time, but yes. Be like those Jawas, right? That's about the size of the damn thing. Okay, so I think that's got all of our PCs. Does it? Am I missing anybody? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am. Oh, yeah, hold on. Okay. So who else would you like to come with, aside from what you have 2 more staterooms?
Bob counts his luggage.
Okay, yeah, Bob's with you. All right. You're going to have a couple of red shirts then. Basically, gunners. They're there for muscle in case you need it. They'll take 1 of the remaining staterooms. There'll be another scientist. Say what?
Sid as a gunnery.
Okay, so Sid comes. That worked. And there you go. Okay, so that's your whole complement. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 peeps plus Pris and Bob. That should be perfectly fine. All right. Within the capabilities of this ship. So next question, in terms of gearing up the Gazelle class, you had a launch that you lost. What would you like in place of that? Just another of the same type, a ship's launch? Because you have them. You have the shipbreaking yard. Do you want something else?
Might as well.
Yeah.
Came in handy as a distraction earlier.
Okay, so we'll put just the equivalent 20-ton ship launch in there. The other options that you might have is you might have, again, the shipbreaking yard, you have anything imaginable in terms of small craft. But you might be able to find a small fighter that you could fit in there, instead of a ship launch. The fighter would be short range, have a laser, only capable of one person at a time, whereas a launch you can carry several people. Okay, so that's how we'll do it. Your 20-ton launch. And are there any other modifications you want to make to the ship while you have it for a couple of weeks? You can't make major structural changes. You can't change out weapons or add features like the drop tanks or internal tanks, collapsibles. One thing I would ask is, what sort of equipment do you want to take in terms of your ship's locker and your cargo? Did you have a small cargo capacity on this thing that you can carry things like extra supplies or weapons or what have you?
Definitely equipment for the red shirts and weaponry, some heavy weapons, just in case.
Okay. To that point, we'll say that your red shirts are battle dress operators. So you have a couple of battle dress suits in the hold.
Make sure that we've done the same disassociating the comms from the computers and other systems on the launch.
And no need to roll. Now that you mentioned it, you'll just get that for free. Also, the battle dress, yes, they are extensively computerized, comms and such. Okay. So, what else do you want here? Roll anybody with survival. Roll it. That's good. Yeah, and that's good too. Okay, so since you don't know what you're getting into, and fair enough. You probably think you ought to take some hazardous environment suits. You know, in addition to the normal spacesuits that you have in this thing, which are good, hazardous environment suits. If you just don't know what you're getting into, they're the things to have. You know, they're not battle dressed, they're not armored monstrosities, but they can handle heavy radiation, particle impacts, all that good stuff. They're intended to work around in insidious atmospheres for a little while, so chemical threats. So we'll say that you have a number of has environment suit, and based on your rolls, we'll go ahead and give you 6. All right. And any other special supplies that you would want to take with you?
Well, assuming I've still got it, I want to take the savvy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. You actually haven't heard from Luna, you know, and that was where you got it from. So yes, you still have it.
A mysterious locked crate that won't be time locked open until we get there.
Okay. Unless you have any other questions or thoughts, then it looks like you have a mission plan, and we will execute. Pardon the pun. No? Okay. Good job. So the day of launch approaches, and Virgil, you go looking for Agatha, for Mom, and she's not in the council chambers, where she's been practically nonstop for the past 3 weeks. You ask around and try to, get a locale on her, and they say that she's gone off to the flight academy, and that doesn't really strike you as too unusual, because one of the few places in town that has an excellent view of the city is the flight academy. The control tower there is just an awesome view. All right, you do want to say we'll be back and reassure that all is well. You get up there, and the flight academy has been fairly empty given what's happened. They haven't been training. They've been busy trying to rebuild the city. So you don't see a lot of flights around, but you do catch her up there in the tower. She's seated. She's not into standing for long periods. She's over 100 years old. But looking out over the city as she does, and turns as you walk into the control tower. Now, this is Agatha Navarre, the leader of this civilization for almost as long as you can remember. She doesn't cry. Something is deeply troubling her.
Kind of walk in without giving her away and that I'm there, just sit down next to her.
She doesn't notice you for a while. She's just panning her view over the city. and finally notices you out of the corner of her eye and turns to look at you and wiping the tears from her eyes. And, well, how long have you been there?
Long enough. Long enough to see someone that as stoic as you break down.
And she hangs her head and says simply, I have to leave.
Yeah, I've heard that from another source as well. Heard that from old, really, I guess your godmother, Una. Met her out in the wilderness. And she said that essentially you are a threat to the world, the ring world specifically. That's not your fault. Can't be helped what kind of blood type you have. But everything that's happened here isn't because of that. The perfect storm of everything happening at once. And luckily enough, we survived. We came out on top. Rithipol Landing stands, a little bruised, burnt, destroyed, but it stands. It's still here. And so are you.
She gives you a wisp of a smile and, puts her hand on your arm. This is selfish of me, but it just doesn't feel fair.
You're full of shit, son.
You're grounded.
Shut up. What are you talking about?
You don't get to go on space adventures.
That's right. You're grounded.
He understands that it doesn't seem fair. And he goes, I grew up here. This ring world and everything surrounding it's all I've ever known. There's all kinds of things happening that's changed my viewpoint of all of this. I want to leave just to see what's out there. I'll never forget this place. But more importantly, this place will never forget you. You've been the leader of this ring world, and the other tribes and stuff have negotiated through you. It's a lot to leave. I get that. But I don't see it as a bad thing. You get to literally be a living legend. Going out.
I just think that maybe as unfair and as I think this is, maybe it is time for a change in leadership. I've held true to the old council's thinking for a long time. Do our own thing, stay safe, huddled into a little ball, nobody can hurt us. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I was so wrong to the point that I didn't even realize the danger I myself posed, that even if nothing happened beyond that, I could have destroyed this entire place just by being here. And you sound like you're not coming back. You are. You'd better.
I'm too stubborn to die.
She smiles at you and nods at that. Yes, you are.
But I agree with you that it is time for a change. We've held on to Blackridge's last wish and his greatest fear, which is something out there bigger than all of us or more powerful, like a virus. No matter what we did or strive to think and act like he did, I'm afraid what he feared has found us. So either we get ahead of it, or we hope that the gunners, that Admiral Toolable was right in his boasting that they could take care of any threat out there. I doubt it. That's just me.
The Admiral couldn't save himself.
And that's what I'm trying to do for us. Give us a way to save ourselves, get ahead of this. I don't know what it is we're looking at. I know to avoid it. I'm just trying to be a pathfinder and find us a new home. Somewhere you don't have to flee.
Mom moment. She stands and wells up in tears and gives you a hug. Doesn't say anything. She just looks at you for a minute, nods, and walks out of the control room.
He goes, "Whoa, that was the best talk we've had in years." But he lets her leave on her own, takes in the view, then leaves.
So outside of town, remembering that the starport is closed for the moment, you have several ships laid out in a field with crews taking care of them, one of which is the Eliethia. You got the crew of the Eliethia gathered there, and a couple of the High Council and several people gathered in a crowd around. There's a lot of chattering and talking, and no one really quite knows what to make of this. It's not something that Rithipol Landing's ever done before, sending out an expedition into the unknown like this. When we send people to other places in the system, we can literally see them where they're going. And if they go missing, we have a hope in hell of finding out what happened. This is different. So there's a bit of an uncomfortable atmosphere, but nonetheless a positive one. Harriet Singh, the leader of the flights, comes up to the crew and gives an official speech. But after that, for the crowd, she comes up to you folks and, please come back. And I'm not talking about bringing intel. This is probably one of the most dangerous things I've ever conceived of sending people to do. So please come back. And she walks off, and they give the Eliethia room to launch and go about her business. So whoever's driving, make a piloting roll.
That starship pilot we have is
Hugh Samuel had been doing most of the driving before. Okay, that works. So as the Eliethia lifts off from that field outside of Rithipol Landing, you got lots of cheering and waving. A couple of Novas actually come alongside and escort you out as you lift away. But they peel off to give you room to make the jump. Anybody have astrogation?
Yes.
Okay, Virgil, you look at these folks and you think that they're doing their jobs well, but you're not really sure about the math. Okay, so astrogation. I see it. All right, good. So you lay in this course, and mind you, this is the first time you've ever done it for real. And this is everything that's happening on this ship is new. So you're like, I think it's good. Is there anybody with astrogation aside from Loki that can possibly double check that figure? Or maybe a jack of all trades roll?
Throw a jack of all trades.
Okay. And you have astrogation? Holy moly. Miniman's, we're all going to die. You're going to throw us into a sun.
It's coming right at us.
Oh, wait, that's a negative. Sorry, never mind.
I think between all of that, yeah, you guys, you work it out. Yes, the course is checked and double checked and triple checked. Here's one of the difficulties. Normally, when you're doing these jumps, you're going from a system to another system. Systems in space are not traveling in the same direction with the same velocity. You have to make adjustments based on the relative difference in velocity between the system you're leaving from and your true vector and the vector you want to end up at the target system. And you can do that with some ease because you can see the star typically that you're headed towards. It's there, and there have been measurements, detailed measurements over time measuring that trajectory. But when you're targeting something in deep space, there's nothing to see, not at this distance. So you're having to rely entirely on the measurements that were taken decades ago as to the destination and the thrust vector and such, so that you'll end up close to where you want to be, but not too close and not going speed of light in the wrong direction, that sort of thing. So jump space is, in a word, hard. Looks like you think, though, that you're going to land. Where do you want to land exactly? How far away? Because one of your things was that you don't want to land on top of it, but rather at a distance so you can observe and see what's there and then report back. So give me an idea, like a light minute, a light hour, a light day, a light year.
Just outside of our scanning range.
Your scanning range is relatively close to get details, but you can take pictures. You can see it with telescopes. light days away. But you won't see things like active reactors. There's one ship alive or with power source or that sort of thing. You'll just see what's there. Is that good enough? A light day?
A light day sounds good.
Okay. All right. So anybody with, if you have engineering jump drives, go ahead and roll it. If we don't have anybody with that specifically, okay, great. So Loki steps up, and for the first time in God knows how long, at least 100 years, you fire up the jump drives, the jump capacitors, cross your fingers, and enter jump space. All right. None of you have been in jump space before. So let's do this. See here.
The amount
Everybody-
of your warranty is expiring messages we'll receive when we make it back to civilized area, it's going to be amazing.
That's right. And it's just going to be. Everybody roll base endurance. Oh.
That one sucked.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Anna?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Really?
So Anna and Loki, and to a much lesser extent others. Let's see. Bitterman did really well, blah, blah, blah. Samuel a little bit, but Anna and Loki, you're the ones that this impacts the most. You experience, the ship enters jump, and the next thing you realize, you're retching on the ground. Just that transition was just so ripping your world, and you're going two directions at once. You immediately lose your most recent meal on the deck. Loki, you recover somewhat with help from one of the red shirts that was back there, and John. But Anna, you're out for the whole trip. You got violently jump sick. You've never been in jump before. Now people acclimate to it. Or people that have traveled in jump space often, particularly spacers, if they have a bad first reaction to it, they can get used to it. But you had a particularly bad first reaction to it, almost as bad as can be.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're basically sacked out the whole damn trip. You can't hold anything down. You're having to have John, help you with fluids. It's just miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Samuel, you're queasy, but you're not decked out like Anna is. And Loki, you're somewhere in between. You can hold meals down, but you wish you couldn't. That sort of thing. Everybody else, it doesn't. Some of you don't see what the problem is. Some of you, like Virgil, it's like walk in the park. What's wrong with you guys? Emmerich did fine. One of your red shirts is like Samuel. He's a bit queasy. The other red shirts like Virgil's like, what's the problem? Craziest thing is that the press, which has come along, at Bitterman's insistence, seems to really enjoy jump space. She was freaking out at how confined things were, and there are too many hiding places for predators or prey and traps, and just really bad. It's like a cat having to explore everything and see all the little shady spots. But once you enter jump space, her mood improved dramatically.
Hanging her head out the window with her tongue flapping in the breeze.
That's right. It's all good.
Who would think the 50-year-old man of the wild animal would do best in space?
That seems to be the case, though. All right, so let me set this up for you. So your travel in jump space is textbook routine. Having never done it before, you're not sure what to expect, but it's actually fairly boring and nothing dramatic happens. It's not like the old bare necessity where you had passengers. Never again. So let's see here. Let me look at it first. So you folks are actually landing far away. What is? Yeah. Yes, please. I didn't realize I was doing that. So let me stop. There you go. Okay, great. Perfect. All right. Let me set a couple things up here. All right. So a light day. That's a light year. Here we go. Is Oh, yeah. 25 billion kilometers. Yeah, 26 nearly. And that's well outside of your ability to transit in a couple of weeks, I think, with reasonably. Let me confirm that, though. Let's see. Where's the space travel? Yeah, here we are. There we are. Okay. At 4Gs. That doesn't quite seem right. Oh, hold on. Let's see why that doesn't seem right. 26 billion light years. Yeah, that's not right.
Years, that's a bit of a misjump.
So 18 days under full thrust to cover one light day. That would exceed your fuel capacity and still be able to make the trip home. But you could do it. You would have sufficient fuel to pull that off if you decided to do that. All right. So let's get back to this. See if it'll let me do all this at once. So I'm going to show you and let you look at it. The icons that you see have tooltips, so you can mouse over to get a little bit of information, but you're not going to get full sensor information. You're just taking a picture, literally. You'll just have to analyze it from your distance there far away. And there'll be some music here. Hopefully it won't feed back. So I'll turn it down a little bit. Here we go. You see this one light day away. There's actually quite a lot surrounding Way Station 1. Rather unexpected. The vast majority of those, the first thing is that all you're seeing is reflected starlight. There's no star here. So you don't see anything bright reflections, but you can make it out. Looks like the remains of hundreds of smaller ships. And I do say remains because they've all pretty much been blasted to pieces. There are several larger ships that are reasonably intact, and those are the ones that you see there. Surrounded in debris fields that apparently have been drifting for decades. That's why you see spheres around them, pushed out by explosions. So just give you folks a moment or two to look at that and digest it, and then we'll talk about it.
Definitely get some scans going for sure.
Too far to scan. All you can do is take pictures. You're a light day away. That's well beyond your active scan range. But you can analyze, which that's one good reason to have Emmerich here. So what you are looking at is a time capsule. The remains of events that took place decades ago. And I'll give you a couple of freebies for just looking at it. Where you see those rings of debris, that is apparently they're spheres, in fact, but those are apparently debris fields that came off of capital ships that were created at the time of their destruction. You see the husk of the remains of those ships, the two heavy cruisers, the two command ships, the tanker, etc. They're just so massive that them becoming inoperable, blowing up, they're still mostly there. But their debris field was pushed away in their final battle and has drifted over the decades to create these spheres around them, much like you have planetary nebula created by novas and supernovas around stars when they are destroyed. The smaller debris fields are, as I say, hundreds of smaller ships, and you can't really make out any particular individual ship, just bits and pieces of them. It looks like they've been thoroughly destroyed, but the bits and pieces are like far traders, like the bare necessity. Bits of just any class imaginable from mostly Aslan and Imperial designs. Now, the three remaining ships, the two Varg frigates and the Colonial Transport, from your visual observation, all three of those ships appear intact. They don't appear to have battle damage, unlike every other ship here. One of the Varg frigates, Varg Frigate 2, is actually tied up to the remains of the way station. The colonial transport is close to the way station, but not tied up to it. And it looks like Var Frigate 1 is caught in the middle of a particularly heavy, dense area of debris. It reached the convergent points of several debris fields and it may have been damaged and caught there. Anyway, the point about those three ships in particular is that they, unlike the others, don't appear to have been part of the original battle that took place. You receive on your isolated comm system no transmissions.
Are any of those ships thrusting?
None. They're all drifting. It is notable. You remember what I said about moving the way station? That they are in the vicinity of the way station itself. That would imply that when these ships arrived, they knew where to go.
Do we pick up anything on infrared?
It's too far for your sensors. That's the disadvantage of coming out this far.
But we can stare at it for 2 weeks.
You can stare at it for a while, yeah. However long you're comfortable. They're not, anything that's there, if it's active, won't notice you for a day. So you have at least that long to figure out what you want to do. That's the advantage of jumping in out here. There's no faster than light sensors. I'll continue giving you little tidbits until you make a decision how you want to proceed. So the Eliethia, the heavy cruiser there from the Aslan, it is one of their top line heavy cruisers. It's old enough that the Eliethia knows about it. The Eliethia, if you recall, is 115 years old, at least. That's the last time she had a data update. So the Eliethia isn't like the newest cruiser ever built, but it is one of their top line jobs. 50,000 tons, very capable. It's telling that she's torn up like she is. If you were to guess, the Eliethia was here escorting those two command ships. What the command ships are, they're 3,000 ton of what they call battle leaders in the Aslan. And basically what that means is that's an admiral's ship, a clan leader. And it's rare for there to be two of them in any engagement. There's probably amongst the smaller ship debris escorts that escorted these ships here, but they've been too immolated for you to be able to pick them out. The tanker, its presence here is obvious. That's an Aslan design. It would serve the same purpose as the Yorthal did. Because these command ships and the cruiser, they have jump 4 capability. But that's not enough to get all the way out to where they were intending to go, apparently. The Atlantic, that is a ubiquitous Imperial heavy cruiser design. Hundreds of those guys were manufactured. It too is probably in a company of escort ships that you can't really make out. And I'm also not giving names because at this distance, you can't really pick out any identifying features, that would give you what the name of that ship was. But to see it here, and again, as beat up as it is, the only thing that makes sense is that the Aslan heavy cruiser and the Imperial heavy cruiser went at it. And there was a fleet battle here. So, any thoughts or questions at that point?
I know our
First thought is we'll just proceed as normal. See if anything lights up, but we'll head for the base.
Okay. John wants to get a little bit closer.
What
So how
does
about
the
the-
Eliethia know about the difference in the manufacturing time periods of the three that are intact and the ones that aren't?
It's much quicker to build those frigates. The frigates are 600-ton vessels. The colonial transport is a 3,000-ton vessel. But it takes years to make those heavy cruisers. It takes a long time to make capital ships. Whereas those guys
from the same time period.
I see. Okay. They are. They're actually they're all common designs from the Golden Age, including the Varg frigates. The Varg frigates were typical of Varg roaming bands back 100 years ago. The colonial transport, that design has been around for centuries. It's basically what you think it is. It has an enormous number of low berths, large cargo capacity. It's intended to take colonists to where they want to set up their colony. The three ships, the two Frog and the Colonial Transport, are intact, as I said. They don't have debris fields around them, and it's very likely, given that the Frog frigate 2 there is actually tied up to the station. If it had been tied up to the station when the station blew, it wouldn't be there. It would have been destroyed as well. So clearly it did that after the station was destroyed. And based on the debris fields that you see, this whole big battle that took place between the capital ships and the station happened at the same time, because the debris fields are all spaced out the same distance. If anybody won, Emery says. I don't think they could have bugged out because they didn't have the fuel to do it. Once they got here and were involved in this battle, whatever happened to them after the battle, they still perished. They starved to death, they suffocated.
There is something that
perished.
doesn't make sense here. Very much doesn't make sense here. Especially for those heavy cruisers. This is the equivalent of slapping distance.
That is true. This is all very tight.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if there's any grog left in that tanker.
Only one way to find out.
How long do people in low berths last in that colonial transport?
In theory, they could last a good long time if the systems are still active and low berths are designed to be to operate independently.
As long as they're powered.
Well, they're powered. So here's the thing. You're a light day away from that. If burning at 4 Gs, it would take you 18 days, or essentially 3 weeks, to close the distance to approach. Now, you could be just as fast jumping out and jumping back, to a closer distance. So you may want to consider how you want to approach.
Anything we do to approach will burn so much fuel we won't be able to get back.
That's right. If you make the approach from here, you'll be able to make that approach, but then you won't have enough fuel for the return trip. But if you go back, then you can top off the tanks and report and come back at some closer distance.
Yeah, I don't like the burn up all our fuel option.
Yeah.
Yes. Take readings, go home, refill, pop back.
But yeah, we got what we came here for. See if we can even get here. We looked.
And saw that. Okay. Alrighty. So head back and refuel and consult, and then have a plan for how to return.
Yeah.
I do want to, I vote we do stay here for 2 or 3 days.
Yeah,
See if
for
there's any
readings and
reaction.
everything. Just keep an eye on this stuff.
Okay. Let's see here. Let me look at something real quick. That's good. That's good. That's good. Yeah, here we are. So let's get an intelligence roll from everybody. So Anna, who's been determined to be useful after spending all that time, just out,
Yeah.
is manning the bridge with Virgil. You're doing your keep watch for several days, and ship falls back into the routine that you had while you're in jump space, because you're just doing some routine maintenance, getting the jump drives prepped for the next jump, getting the course laid in, which we'll deal with here in a moment. So it's about 26 hours later after you arrive that first you, Anna, notice, wait, something's changed in the picture. And you're doing, okay, go back 2 hours and then come back, and then go back 2 hours and then come back. Yeah, something's changed in the picture.
Yeah, there are now 30 missiles approaching.
The Varg frigate 1, that seemed to be in the middle of a lot of debris, has changed position. And it's hard to make out. It's a light day and you're just looking through a telescope, essentially. But between you and Virgil, you do the math, you plot it. Yeah, it's heading towards you. None of the other ships and debris that you can see has exhibited any change in behavior, but the frigate has.
How long would it take him to get there?
Days, and it's unlikely that it would ever be able to make the trip. That frigate has significant acceleration, but same fuel constraints as you do. And there's no telling how long it's been here.
Picking up any radio?
No, as a matter of fact, you're not. Let's see. Since it's Loki, Loki, do you have a mechanic? You do. You're engineering or mechanics. You know, one or the other. Okay. The isolated comms console is powered down.
Bring it back online?
You'll have to fix it first because with that roll, you trace down the fault and the main power coupling has melted. You can fix it, but again, you might want to ask the question: what do you want to?
I'd leave that offline until we get back.
Okay.
Yeah, in the Circle K.
But that's what happens after 26 hours. That one ship does seem to come to life and head in your direction, and coincidentally, your comm system decides not to work.
Yeah, that seems familiar.
Sir, we're being jammed. Raspberry. Lone Star.
Is there any benefit to shifting our position so that as it comes toward us using momentum only, it won't eventually get to the ring world?
No, it's 9 light years away from the ring world. It's fine. It would take thousands and thousands of years for it to get there, and it certainly doesn't have the fuel for that.
Begs the question, why risk it? That's what seems so odd.
Let's see your prepare rolls. Okay, yeah, Loki.
She's going to disconnect it, but fix it.
Based on your roll, your electronics roll there, you determined that the fault was caused by the ship delivering too much power to the comms unit. It didn't happen. It didn't originate within the comms unit. It originated within the ship.
I'm helping the checklist down. See if I can find the command, track down the command and see what did it.
Folks with computers. The ones, they're back. They're here. Okay. So Samuel and Virgil. Let's see. So Samuel, you guys are. Loki mentions that, and you're like, huh? You're thinking, okay, look, some sort of virus transmitted from that, and it caused the comm unit to, go wacko loco. But that doesn't seem to be what happened. It looks like the comm unit was shut down intentionally, but the ship did it, not the comm unit. Okay, so you start looking, and it does appear to have been an intentional over delivery of power. The command, you can't trace down exactly the origin point. It doesn't seem to have been any individual. It's not associated with an individual's command authorization. The closest you can figure is that the command came from the reactor control subsystem, but that's the best that you get.
No, we'll check it out again once we hit jump space. We'll have 2 weeks to go through it.
Okay, if that's the plan, roll your investigation. And anybody that wants to confirm, go ahead and roll their investigation as well.
Bitterman's a little concerned that it's the reactor control that was causing the problem.
He's probably not alone in that concern. Yes. Okay, so everybody kind of, that looks good. Everything's fine. We're not going to go into a sun or anything, you think? So, back into jump space. See, 2 plasma turrets and 2 triple beam lasers.
And the Varg frigate is on a straight intercept course.
That's the best you can figure, just based on visual observations over an hour or two. You think it is, yeah. But are you?
Okay. All right. I was just thinking about something, but no.
Alrighty. What's the plan? Jump space was the last thing I heard.
I want to check the reactor control out first. That's cool.
Gonna check out the reactor control first.
Okay, we'll roll it. Anybody that's trying, it's another computer's roll.
First.
Oh. Oh, wow. Look at you guys. I can't now give it to you with Virgil's roll in particular, but everybody rolled really well. Okay. So you've laid in the course, but with Bitterman's echoing the concern everybody has with the information that you have. Okay. Let's check out the reactor control that our life depends on and see what's going on with it. This does require taking the reactor offline. But, okay. You have batteries, you have life support suits. You're stoic spaceman, you're not going to die immediately. So here's what happens. John, you're back there and you're assisting them by managing the reactor. You enter the commands to take the reactor offline. Beep, 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 beep. Something odd happens. Your controls indicate the reactor's offline, but the ship doesn't lose power. In fact, from the bridge, it looks like the ship's at full power. All systems in the green. That's what you, Virgil. So you're still rolling on your rolls there. Say, okay. Is the reactor actually offline? And there are visual ways to indicate this. Yes, in fact, the main reactor is offline. It is not generating power yet. The ship's systems indicate that power is being delivered from the reactor. So there's a kind of a physical impossibility. So
Somebody go look at the glowy stabby thingy.
it's good insight. You, Samuel, you kind of glance at the glowy stabby thingy. And it is stabby and glowy as it normally is, but not in an unusual way. You remember when you stabbed it into the Gamemaster power regulator and it just lit up? It's not like that right now. But for the computer roll, it wasn't something that when you were working on the ship, getting it repaired, you didn't notice this, even though you had some time to work while you were working on it. You didn't make that roll. There is an additional component attached to the reactor control system. Virgil, you're going through this and you say, hey, John, why don't you look at C3? There's something on that bus that's still active. So yeah, John, you're digging around back there. Yes, in fact there is. Let's pull up the design specs for the Gazelle. What is that? Where does it go? It's not stock. It's not supposed to be there. Okay. Apparently, people, when they were working the reactor before, they may have seen it and just didn't think about it because nobody's really familiar with Gazelles. It's not like something that you deal with every day back in Rithipol Landing. But you staring at this thing, a computer component that has power that shouldn't. So where is this going? Look a little bit deeper. There's a
hamster wheel in here.
Yeah, where'd that guy come from? There's some sort of matrix, thin filaments that surround that computer control system. And they all kind of carefully work your way through it. Because now that you don't have power flowing everywhere else, it's pretty easy to trace this. You can make out, okay, it goes here and there and everywhere. Let me find it. Maybe not.
Flux capacitor?
You were passing 88, so yeah, that's entirely possible.
I'm seeing some serious shit.
Oh, okay. I guess I didn't have the... Oh, I do. You think you isolate it, John. You think you've isolated it to a... It's not something that would have shown up casually. You had to really dig in there to find it. It's something... It's embedded within the reactor casing itself. It is faintly radioactive. That's how you were able to track it down without the reactor going. It reminds you a lot of... Was John there or was Ann there? Ann was there. So you take a picture of this whole setup and pass it around. And the folks that were on the transport that got shot down, you ended up meeting Una and going into the old ancient ruins there.
Mm-hmm.
It looks a lot like some of the stuff that you saw in that ancient ruin, particularly around some of the still active ancient tech. And the best example of that was this thing.
Oh, so Una just slapped a ancient battery in here. That makes sense.
And this is linked into the
So
General-
far, you've seen it in the reactor control system, but you don't know. It might go elsewhere too.
but that's for the main power plant.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a turbo for the big one.
And you're not sure that Una did this because if you'll recall, when you found the Eliethia, the control surfaces had been destroyed. And it was Una that did it, but you never heard the whole story there. But yeah, there's some sort of ancient tech integrated with at least the reactor control system on the Eliethia, like what it saw coming from the comm system.
And it didn't blow us up on the way out here either. Maybe we could just go ahead and go back home and figure it out there.
Is that your plan?
It sounds like a plan.
We can wait until we've jumped into jump space, but I'd be interested to see if there was a similar device anywhere attached to the power feeds for the jump drive, because it's its own special reactor.
That's right. So separate systems and everything. So do you want to take the time to investigate that, or are you going to just go ahead and jump in and investigate it later on the trip back?
I'm easy. I can keep digging or I can get back on the stick. You guys let me know.
Let's take the time.
I'm going to make sure, as long as we have maneuverability, I'm going to randomly every few minutes, I'm going to change our vector a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. An investigate roll for those that have it, and some sort of technical roll for those that don't. And we'll do this thing, and you don't need to roll for that maneuvering. It's really too far away for little vector changes like that to really make a difference in observable vector of the Varg frigate. All you can tell is that it does continue to approach, and you're not really sure whether it's thrusting at full or what. The closer it gets, the easier
I
it is.
just don't want to be sitting in the same spot whenever it decides to start firing lasers.
Or kinetic kills or something. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, kinetic kills would take a week to get here, but
Yeah, that's right. It's good. Okay. So Samuel, now that you've seen this thing in the reactor control system in the M drive, everybody starts spreading out, looking at other systems, because it's clear that this thing has been able to, whether it was intentionally disguised or disguising itself or not, it just wasn't noticed by the teams that were working on the ship, including you, until you had a situation where you had to shut down the reactor, deep space, no other noise, no other signals whatsoever, and then you were barely able to see it because of that 15 computer roll from Virgil. So now that you know what to look for, though, you do begin to see signs that there is a parallel network pervading the ship. Thin strands of what appears to be ancient tech, and we're not talking chrome tech, ancient tech, that goes pretty much throughout the ship, all the way up to and including the jump drive and the lanthanum matrix on the surface. So it's very fully infiltrated throughout the ship. This is not something that was carefully retrofitted. You couldn't imagine the ship would have to basically have been built with something like this, using production methods that were available to the Imperium. But rather, it looks like something that grew on its own.
All right, resistance is futile.
this might explain why whatever it was that affected the ships that went crazy over Rithipol Landing didn't appear to affect us.
And if you recall, in that scenario, you received the same transmissions as those other ships, but you never received them. They were immediately discarded by the ship systems, the Eliethia ship systems. You couldn't even so much as analyze them because the Eliethia just refused to record them, and won't even make you roll for it. But that might explain what just happened and the way it happened. Prior to the work you did to isolate the comm system from the rest of the ship, the comm system was integral to the rest of the ship and integral to this network. But you cut those links. So now the comm system was cut off from whatever protection might have been afforded by the ancient tech that encompassed the rest of the ship. So yes, the comm system was impacted by the transmissions just now. The rest of the ship decided no and cut off the comm system.
One last thing to check as far as this infiltrating the ship. The ship has been hooked up to and connected up to, and all the docking material and data sharing stuff and everything for the launch for probably a month. Can we detect any of this stuff in the launch?
Again, won't make you roll for it. Yes, you can actually. The infiltration is not as extensive as it is in the Eliethia. It's almost like in the Eliethia, it's formed a crystal and it's stable now. But it knows that it created the shape it needed to shape and it's done. But it's slowly beginning to work into the launch as well. But it hasn't reached like control systems in the launch yet. Just it's spreading out from the connection points. So any other thoughts or actions that you'd like to take?
Just the thought that we observed what we came here to observe. We need to say if this was going to kill us in jump space, it would have killed us in jump space already. I'd say we get out of here.
And Emmerich asks, what about the comm system? If we're right, it's been impacted by whatever impacted the ships back at Ringworld.
It's good that it was disconnected from the other systems.
We want to bring it back with us, though.
Can you just remove the transmitters, and that way we can study it and learn how to counter?
Yeah, we could take it back to study.
Just make sure it's safe and can't transmit anything. I mean,
It's pretty toast right now, yeah. You got a double dose. The reactor killed it nicely. Yeah, good reactor.
Yeah.
Sit, stay.
Now, what about the launch? Is it
The
too
launch is probably powered down.
Yeah,
The launch is fine in terms of impact from this transmission, but if you're concerned about the ancient tech thing is going on, yeah. It's not fast, but it's going on. And again, no need for a roll. You really blew the roll away earlier. This is clearly ultra tech level 20 nanotech at work. Self-replicating system infiltration. There has to be some sort of intelligence to it, like any other computerized system, but Dan, if you know where it is or what it's like or how to communicate with it. And as far as you can tell, since I haven't heard the question, but I'm sure Anna in particular would be worried about it, is this infecting us or just the ship? And it's just the ship. As far as you can tell, it doesn't have anything to do with people or even spacesuits. The battle dress hasn't touched it. Your weapons haven't touched it. And by the way, the big blue glowy thing, it seems to avoid that like the plague. There's actually a retreat of the infiltration around the big blue glowy stabby thing.
I see.
Okay, jumping you shall go.
Yes.
So let's see. Anna, and Loki roll you endurance.
I think we went the wrong direction.
Oh boy. So Anna, you're doing better this time, but now Loki, you're doing much worse. Now it's Loki that's just floored. Just sick as can be the whole trip, miserable. Anna, you're just squeezy. Everybody else, you're getting used to it. The folks that did, stellar rolls, endurance rolls to begin with, it's, what's the big deal? You don't notice anything. But Loki, this jump travel just does not agree with you. So on the trip back, you have a week, and you have the opportunity to study what's going on the Eliethia in greater detail. And you, again, just no rolls. You're essentially taking 10 for the trip. So for the scientists and engineers, computer guys, here's your best guess. That you have ancient tech. It is molecular in nature, molecular tech, probably self-replicating off of the materials of the ship. It is probably your impression is that it is not something that is intended for this ship. But rather something that's learning how to work the ship, that has learned how to work the ship. It is adaptable in that way. You can't really identify a central, like a brain structure or a central control, but probably it is a distributed neural network in some way. The intelligence of the thing is distributed throughout the strands of the ship. It is in every system. It does, when you look closely, yes, the jump drive, the M drive, the reactor, life support, the weapons, you name it, but only the ship. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with the people spaces, the spacesuits, it is working into the auxiliary, the launch, but not as aggressively as it apparently has the primary ship. So there you are. And as for its capabilities, you've had just a couple of hints. This might be the time that Loki recalls between retching up an attempt to hold down lunch. That when you first got aboard the ship and needed its power on, that it powered on, but it wasn't Loki that did it. In fact, there was no fusion going on at that moment. Your very first, after you fell through the outside of the ring world, the ship acted autonomously in terms of not driving itself, but providing power to the thrusters. So that was clue one. Clue two might have to do with its performance in battle. It seems to offer some assist to gunners. So it is better fire control than a normal Gazelle would have. And also this ability to resist whatever was happening to the other ships. The computer aboard the Gazelle is still the original computer. That's the thing that actually drives systems directly. The old Imperial computer, the 3-bits, I think it is. But that computer, it seems to have another layer of control layered atop it, and that is this ancient tech stuff. So when this virus began to infiltrate the Imperial computer, the original, the layer of control atop it was able to purge it. But that still doesn't lead you any closer to being able to interact with whatever this thing is, in any way. So, any questions?
Bitterman just treats it like a Priss and tries not to annoy the computer until he gets back home.
And everybody else looks reasonably satisfied or fearful of the situation? Okay.
Yeah.
And the launch's comm system didn't burn out because it wasn't turned on.
That's right. The launch was completely offline, and as you had all the other comm systems on board, you did that for the battle dress and the launch and the ship. It was isolated in any case. But as far as you can tell, the launch's comm system is fine.
We'll hook it back into the launch's systems like normal and let this crud get into it, whatever that is.
Mhm.
Why not?
Offer it the same protection, hopefully.
Yes.
Not sure how long that'll take, but yeah, in theory, that might work. All right. So you exit jump space normally. And of course, you're immediately hailed, but you can't receive the hails because you don't have a comm system except on the launch. I'm sure you realize that and go down to the launch to talk to people.
Yes.
Okay.
We just put our thumbs up in the cockpit window.
We're not dead. Yes. So they don't shoot you. You notice, by the way, that they were prepared to shoot you.
Try to land in
Yeah.
a field where there's no electronics around, guys, so that nothing can spread.
In the ring world, that's easy to do. Okay, so you tell them, what do you report whenever you check in? What do you tell them?
The devastation we saw, and at least the what we needed to report. It depends upon who we're talking to on comms. We're supposed to report to somebody when we get back. So
Yeah, it's going to be Harriet saying, because what you'll learn soon is that Agatha has already left the ring world. She's departed for one of the other outposts in system. So she's actually not there for you to report to when you arrive. So yeah, you talk to Harriet and report all that, and mention the comm stuff, and what do you leave out of the report, I should say, if anything?
I guess once we're talking to Harriet, we should just come clean, I think.
Harriet was one of the two people that most helped you when the attack went on. You remember Harriet and Stannis Mile. You met them in that garden. But yeah.
Yeah, I think once we land, we'll meet up, and I think we'll have a deeper discussion of what we saw and observed and what we think.
And landing far away from Rithipol is wise. Everyone agrees. They'll have a team out there ready to receive and begin to look into that comm unit and see what there is to see.
Be very careful.
Okay. We'll pause at this point. This is probably a good spot. But I do want to give one little future snippet. So you guys file off after shutting down the systems to the extent they want to be shut down. You've now learned. You go out there and talk to Harriet and the crew, and a crew of techs comes aboard, and you advise them of the danger. And yes, we'll be very careful. They remove the comms unit and physically take it out of the ship, the core and the antennas, and pretty much everything physical they can remove, they do. But as you notice, well, you don't notice, and neither do they, unfortunately. But as they're packing it up and securing it and loading it up into a transport, there's this tiny little spark that seems to bridge from the comm unit core over to the truck. And then these two techs get in, start it up, and drive off. And we'll pick it up next time. Okay, good deal. Everybody, thanks for bearing witness, attending, participating. Our podcast format, we need work to try to figure out what we're doing with it.
Yeah.
But at least we got some folks in, and we're still in the herding cat stage. So
let's see. Next week would be Chris.
Yeah, it'll be back up to me.
Chris ran off into the woods when y'all landed, by the way.
Yeah. Nature.
I have to be.
They might come back. You don't know.
Yeah, we may never see him again. I ain't going back there. But basic.
What you want to do, Peg?
I'm still batting a few ideas around right now. I'm still in the what do I want to pitch? Then from there, prepare.
Okay.
Well, there's no grand hurry. We've got 3 other games going. So you just take your time and be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I may put what I've been thinking about in the chat and just let y'all vote on it. See what happens.
Right on. Nodding. Y'all be well, and I will see you soon.
So yeah.
Take care, everybody. Good
See
night.
ya. Bye.